Inside a courtroom built on tradition and power, a young black boy, homeless and unheard, stood quietly in the corner. No one noticed him until the judge collapsed in pain, clutching her stomach. What happened next stunned the courtroom, flipped the narrative, and changed the meaning of justice forever. This is a story of instinctive heroism, unexpected life, and how a child's kindness overturned a verdict no one saw coming. Location: Fifth Circuit Courthouse, Atlanta. Time: 10:58 a.m. Tuesday. The courtroom echoed with the steady rhythm of formal language and tight decorum. Every chair was filled. Suits rustled. Pens tapped. The hum of tense dialogue played between lawyers, witnesses, and the presiding authority, Judge Lorraine Whitmore. She was known for her precision and command. Every motion followed order. Every voice rose only when invited. Then came the scream, sharp, sudden, real. Every head turned. At first, no one moved. Judge Whitmore gasped, her face pale, her body twisting as she reached for the bench. Her gavel fell to the floor with a clatter that echoed through the chamber. Her hand clutched her belly, swollen with life, and she collapsed. Gasps spread like wildfire. A bailiff shouted for help. A lawyer stumbled back, papers falling from his arms. Spectators sat frozen, too stunned to act. Then a figure moved. From the back row, a young boy in a wrinkled blue shirt slipped past startled onlookers. He ducked under the wooden barrier, ignored the yells to stop, and dropped to the judge's side. His hands moved quickly. He lowered her to the floor, tilted her slightly, and checked her breathing. "Her pulse is fast," he said, loud enough for someone to hear. "She needs space to breathe. We need to keep her calm." No one asked who he was. No one tried to stop him. Something in his focus, his calm urgency, silenced doubt. He spoke softly to the judge. His hands stayed steady even as panic cracked around him. A clerk ran to call emergency services. A bailiff cleared the area. And still, the boy stayed beside her, eyes locked on hers, whispering reassurance. Within minutes, paramedics arrived. They took over with practiced speed, but not before one of them paused. Who stabilized her? The crowd parted slightly. The boy stood, brushing off his hands. "I did." There was a beat of silence. He looked much younger up close. Maybe 12, maybe 13. No one had noticed him come in. No one had spoken to him before this moment. He had been just another quiet presence, invisible. Have you ever seen judgment replaced by compassion in a single heartbeat? If you believe ordinary hands can offer extraordinary grace, share this story. Someone is always watching for a reason to believe again. His name was Jalen Carter. He was 13 years old. For the past 3 years, he had survived alone. Homeless since age 10, Jalen moved from one forgotten corner of the city to another. He slept where the weather allowed, abandoned houses in the summer, church basements when they would let him in, the overnight seats at bus stations when he could not find anything else. Some nights, the floor of a laundromat with machines humming beside him. Other nights, curled near the steam grate behind an old bakery. He had no permanent address, no phone, no backpack. What he carried fit into the deep pockets of his coat. A coat too large for him, missing buttons, patched together with duct tape. His mother died of pneumonia the previous winter. They had spent their last weeks together in a shelter that shut its doors when funding disappeared. She had tried to keep him in school, tried to make it seem like things were okay, but cold weather does not wait for a plan, and sickness does not care about dignity. She died, wrapped in a borrowed blanket in a stairwell. Jalen buried that night deep in his memory, not because he forgot, but because remembering too clearly would paralyze him. and he could not afford to stop moving. His father had never been in the picture. No last phone call, no apology, just a blank space where parents should have been. But Jalen was not bitter. He was practical. He knew how to avoid trouble, which alley to sleep in, which public restroom was safe, which gas stations would look the other way if he lingered too long near the heater. He knew how to accept kindness without looking desperate and how to disappear when danger started to simmer. Other homeless families knew him, not as a threat, but as a helper. Jalen had a reputation on the street. He was the boy who held crying babies when mothers needed a moment to rest. He was the one who gave his half sandwich to a hungry child. He was the one who never pushed to the front of the line for food. His hands were always ready, to clean, to carry, to calm. He patched up scraped knees and soothed fevers with cold water and rags. No formal training, just instinct and repetition. His most prized possession was a torn copy of First Aid for Kids. Someone had left it behind at a bus station. Jalen found it one night while searching for dry cardboard. The corners were shredded, pages stained, but the information inside was gold. He read it cover to cover again and again. He memorized the CPR steps, the signs of heat stroke, how to manage shock. The book became his manual, his teacher, his safety net. When he had a moment alone, he practiced the techniques on an old teddy bear he had found in a dumpster. He used socks to simulate slings and a mop handle for splinting practice. No one taught him. He taught himself. He carried the book like others carried wallets, always close, always within reach. Jalen never asked for praise. He rarely asked for help. But he paid attention, always. He noticed who limped and who coughed. He noticed when someone had not eaten, when someone needed a voice. He rarely spoke unless he had something important to say. People sometimes mistook his silence for distance, but really, it was preparation. His mind was always working, always ready. When Judge Lorraine Whitmore collapsed in court, Jalen did not act because he wanted to be seen. He acted because he knew what needed to be done. The pages of his book were already alive in his head. His hands moved before the crowd could even speak. Wisdom had not come to Jalen through textbooks or lectures. It had come from the cold ground, the missing meals, and the quiet determination to survive not just for himself, but for those around him. Have you ever seen wisdom born from pure survival? If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes experience can teach even when the world refuses to. Just 3 days before the courtroom chaos, Jalen Carter had been arrested. The charge: theft from a downtown department store. Police said he had stolen a stroller and 2 cans of infant formula. He had been spotted near the emergency exit, bundled in layers, a shopping cart beside him. The call came from a clerk who claimed he ran when confronted. Officers caught up with him at the subway station. He was crouched beside a bench, cradling something wrapped in an oversized coat. That something was a newborn. She had been left there alone. The air was below freezing. She had no blanket, no hat, just a hospital bracelet on her wrist. Jalen had seen her while trying to find a warm place to sleep. He had watched for minutes, waiting to see if someone returned. No one did, so he acted. He had taken the stroller and formula not out of greed, but out of necessity, for her. He wrapped her in his own coat, gave her small sips of formula using a straw he cleaned with water. Then he held her close and waited for the first train to bring more people. He had no phone, no voice of authority, just instincts sharpened by survival. When the police arrived, he tried to explain, but they did not listen. They arrested him on sight, hands behind his back. He was led out into the cold again. The baby was taken by paramedics. Questions came later, but none that looked for understanding. The store pressed charges. Loss prevention said policy was policy. Cameras caught him walking out with unpaid items. That was enough. They added trespassing to the list. By Monday morning, Jalen was in a holding room. No guardian, no lawyer who knew his name yet. His hearing was scheduled before Judge Lorraine Whitmore. Inside the juvenile court, he sat with hands folded. No slouching, no defiance, just quiet. The baby, now warm and stable, had been brought by the caseworker for identification and transfer. She slept peacefully in a carrier. Her presence in the courtroom made some uncomfortable. Others pretended not to notice. But Jalen never took his eyes off her. When asked to speak, he did not. When told to explain his actions, he remained silent. Some mistook his silence for guilt. Others saw it as stubbornness. But Jalen did not speak because he thought words would not matter. Not when truth had already been overlooked. Not when every attempt to explain had been silenced before. Judge Whitmore studied him carefully. She read the file. She glanced at the surveillance footage. Her eyes narrowed, then softened. There was something in her posture that suggested conflict. She saw the footage. Him tucking the baby into the stroller. Him slipping cans of formula into a torn grocery bag. Him rubbing her hands to keep them warm. Him pacing, watching, then finally sitting beside her with a look that was not fear. It was urgency. It did not align with theft. It aligned with instinct. Still, the charges stood. Protocol demanded the process continue. Jalen remained quiet, but he never looked away from the baby. The caseworker watched this closely. So did the clerk. So did the judge. Justice, often spoken with strength and certainty, suddenly felt fragile. Then came the seizure, the scream, the collapse. In a single moment, the courtroom changed. Roles reversed. The boy in shackles became the one who knew what to do. While others froze, he moved. While others shouted, he listened. And while the judge lay vulnerable, it was the accused who became her shield. Jalen had walked into court as a defendant. He left that moment as something more. Have you ever watched justice walk into court wearing shackles? If this part of the story made you rethink what guilt looks like, share it with someone who needs to remember that intention matters as much as outcome. On the morning of the hearing, the air inside the juvenile courtroom was thick with tension. Court staff whispered as they passed each other in the hallway. The case was unusual, but not because of its charges. A teenager accused of petty theft, a stroller, 2 cans of formula. To them, it was routine, disposable, forgettable. Just another one, a clerk muttered, probably looking for attention. Another said under their breath. Jalen sat in silence, wrists still cuffed, eyes focused ahead. He did not shift in his seat. He did not blink at the stairs. But he noticed everything. Judge Lorraine Whitmore entered the room with practiced poise, but something in her walk betrayed discomfort. Her steps were slower, her shoulders stiff. She was in her 3rd trimester and had refused medical leave, choosing instead to finish the last week of her scheduled hearings. As the courtroom settled and the bailiff called the case, she cleared her throat and glanced over her glasses. Jalen stood as instructed, still calm, still silent. She began the proceedings, reading through the formal script, but her voice wavered. A flicker of pain crossed her face. She adjusted in her seat, tried to hide it. Then, without warning, she gasped. Her hands gripped the bench. Her eyes widened. The gavel slipped from her grasp and hit the floor with a sharp crack. A beat later, her knees gave out. Panic swept the room. A lawyer stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. Another dropped a stack of files. One of the clerks let out a short, panicked cry. Phones fumbled from hands as a few scrambled to dial for help. "She's going into labor," someone screamed. The courtroom, so rigid and formal just moments ago, was now frozen in confusion. No one moved. No one knew what to do, except Jalen. In one fluid motion, he broke free from the bailiff's grip, not by force, but by purpose. The officer, too shocked to resist, let go. Jalen stepped forward and dropped to his knees beside the judge. The floor was hard, cold, but he barely noticed. "Ma'am, you need to lie back," he said, voice steady. "You are having contractions. I have seen this before." He glanced up and waved at the bailiff. "We need space. Clear the area around her. She needs air." No one argued. He helped ease her onto the ground, supporting her back with the judge's robe as a cushion. Her breathing was shallow, strained. "Try to stay calm," Jalen said, meeting her eyes. "In through your nose, out through your mouth." Just like that. The same staff who had dismissed him just minutes earlier now stared in disbelief. The courtroom had forgotten its hierarchy, its structure, its power. Jalen leaned over and checked her pulse. Fast, but not erratic. Her forehead was slick with sweat. A clerk whispered, "How does he know what to do?" Another replied, "I do not know, but he is the only one helping." Paramedics had been called, but they had not arrived. Every second stretched long and sharp. In that moment, no one saw a defendant. No one saw a thief. They saw someone who had acted without hesitation when it mattered most. The courtroom remembered its humanity. Have you ever seen a courtroom forget its power in the face of panic? If this chapter reminded you that instincts matter more than titles, share it with someone who believes action defines character. Paramedics had been called. Multiple units were en route. But the dispatcher warned of delays. A traffic pileup downtown had blocked the nearest routes. No one could say when medical help would actually arrive. Inside the courtroom, time began to fracture. Every second seemed to stretch impossibly thin. Jalen did not panic. He moved quickly, speaking with calm authority. He turned to the court clerk. "I need clean towels and hot water. Now." The clerk blinked in shock but ran. Jalen pointed to a juror near the front. "You! There's a first aid kit in that cabinet. Bring it." To the bailiff. "Clear this space. Push the tables back. We need room." The judge was now lying flat. Her breaths shallow and quick, her grip tight on Jalen's wrist. "I need you to breathe deep," he told her, steadying her shoulders. "Count with me. In for 4, out for 4. He took the robe she had worn and folded it into a cushion beneath her back. She winced. Sweat beaded on her forehead. The court nurse, who had been sitting in the gallery, stepped forward. "What should I do?" Jalen replied without hesitation. "Hold her hand, keep her grounded, and keep talking to her." A few lawyers stood at a distance, too stunned to speak. Others obeyed silently, passing towels, clearing furniture, giving space. The judge clutched Jalen's forearm with one hand, her knuckles white. "She is close," Jalen said to no one in particular. "The baby is coming now." He rolled up his sleeves, used sanitizer from the first aid kit, checked her pulse again. "Contractions are fast. We do not have time. We do this here." He positioned himself carefully. "Judge, listen to me. I am here. I am going to help you. You are not alone." The room quieted. No phones rang. No whispers stirred. Just the shallow rhythm of breathing and Jalen's soft voice. Each contraction came stronger than the last. Jalen counted with her, coached her, spoke in rhythms that soothed. You are safe. You are strong. You are doing beautifully." Minutes passed like hours. At last, the moment came. The baby's cry broke the silence, sharp and whole. Jalen caught her with both hands, a tiny girl, pink and warm. He wrapped her in his jacket, folded carefully like a cradle. He checked her breathing, wiped her nose gently, and smiled. She is breathing. She is perfect. He had delivered more than a child. He had delivered hope. Have you ever seen a child deliver hope where judgment once ruled? If this moment shifted something in you, share it with someone who needs to believe grace can come from the most unexpected places. For a moment, time stopped. Not a voice moved, not a foot shifted. Jalen stood still beside the judge, his jacket now empty of the newborn he had swaddled only minutes earlier. The paramedics worked with quiet efficiency around him, tending to the judge and her child. But the rest of the room was frozen. Everyone was looking at him. Not as a thief, not as a case number, not as a boy in handcuffs. They looked at him like a savior. Judge Lorraine Whitmore, weak but conscious, opened her eyes and met his. Her voice barely more than a whisper. She reached out and touched his cheek with shaking fingers. "You did it," she said. Jalen nodded, but said nothing. His hands, stained with effort and warmth, stayed at his sides. In the front row, an attorney dropped his pen. It hit the floor and rolled under the table, but he made no move to retrieve it. He just stared. A juror wiped at their face, blinking away tears they had not expected to shed today. Even the court stenographer had stopped typing. Her hands hovered just above the keys. No one could explain what they were feeling. No legal term could capture it. No file, no report, no evidence list could reflect what they had witnessed. The bailiff, standing just behind Jalen, swallowed hard. His hands had once locked the cuffs around the boy's wrists with practiced detachment. Now, those same hands trembled as he reached for the key. He fumbled once, then tried again. With a soft click, the restraints fell away. Jalen looked down at his wrists, not with surprise, but with quiet understanding. He had not expected it. He had not asked for it. But the truth had finally weighed more than the accusation. Someone from the back of the room whispered, "That boy saved 2 lives today." The room remained silent, but the silence was different now. It was not stunned. It was reverent. The judge's baby stirred in the nurse's arms. Her soft cries were the only sound. But they did not feel like interruptions. They felt like beginnings. No one reached for their notes. No one returned to protocol. It felt like even the courtroom walls had softened. Jalen stepped back slowly. He took a seat, not because anyone told him to, but because the moment had passed and he knew his part was done. He folded his hands, sat up straight, and looked forward. This time, the courtroom looked with him. The charges had not yet been dropped. The documents still sat in a folder. But everyone in the room knew something irreversible had taken place. Whatever happened next would carry the weight of what they had just witnessed. It was not just the judge who had been delivered. It was the courtroom itself, delivered from cynicism, from assumption, from the comfort of black and white thinking. Jalen had walked in wearing shackles. Now, the only thing anyone saw was grace. Have you ever watched guilt dissolve beneath the weight of truth? If this story brought clarity to your view of justice, share it with someone who still believes real change begins with how we choose to see. Within 24 hours, the story spread across the city, then the country. Headlines lit up screens and echoed through newsrooms. One stood out more than the others. Homeless boy delivers judge's baby during his own trial. Clips of courtroom security footage were looped on every channel. The sight of a small, steady figure kneeling beside a collapsing judge played between commercials and interviews. Experts debated legal reform, while social workers talked about systemic gaps. But what captured the world's attention was not theory. It was action. Jalen, Carter's name, trended across platforms, not because he had asked for attention, but because his compassion had broken through walls that many thought immovable. The courthouse reopened the next day under heavy media presence. Cameras flashed. Reporters gathered outside, calling for statements. Inside, the tone had shifted. Courtrooms are usually quiet places of formality, but today something else hung in the air: expectation, respect, wonder. Jalen returned in the same oversized coat, but no longer in cuffs. His head was high. His pace was calm. When he stepped into the courtroom, everyone stood. Not by rule, by instinct. There was no trial that day, no sentencing. The court had reconvened for one purpose only: to dismiss all charges. The prosecutor spoke first. In light of the complete circumstances, we move for immediate dismissal and sealing of all records. The judge on the bench nodded, his voice steady. Approved. Let the record reflect that Mr. Jalen Carter's case is closed. He leaves here today with no conviction. There was a pause. Then a clerk stepped forward with a note. It had come from a hospital room nearby. Judge Lorraine Whitmore, still recovering but stable, had sent a message to be read into the record. The court fell silent as her voice, printed in careful handwriting, was shared aloud. I witnessed something few judges ever will. Not only did Jalen save my life and my child's life, he showed us all what real justice looks like. He is not just innocent, he is extraordinary. With permission of the court and the Department of Child Services, I request to become his legal guardian until a permanent home can be found. My home is open. My heart already is. A stillness followed. Then the room erupted, not in noise but in movement. People stood, some with tears in their eyes, some with hands folded in front of them. No gavels were struck, no calls for order were made. The moment did not need them. Applause rose, not wild, but full. Not loud, but strong. Jalen stood at the center, still quiet, still composed. But his eyes glistened. He looked around the room and saw not the people who had judged him, but the people who had seen him. Finally seen him. The applause lasted only a minute, but its echo would follow him for a lifetime. Outside the courtroom, cameras rolled, microphones extended. But Jalen said only one thing. I just did what my mom would have done. He walked down the courthouse steps not as a defendant but as a symbol of possibility, of transformation, of what happens when systems open their eyes and hearts. From her hospital bed, Judge Whitmore watched the footage. Her baby rested quietly beside her, wrapped in the jacket Jalen had given up to keep the child warm. She smiled. At her bedside sat a file, not one of criminal record but of guardianship forms. The story would travel far. There would be features, tributes, scholarship offers. But none of that would mean as much as that day in court, when a boy's dignity was returned to him by the same system that once tried to take it away. Jalen's life had been changed forever, not by a sentence, but by a choice made by a woman who knew what it meant to trust in someone the world overlooked. Have you ever seen a life sentence reversed with love? If this chapter gave you hope, share it with someone who believes redemption belongs to everyone. The world did not look away. Within hours of the courtroom story breaking, it was everywhere. News networks played the footage on repeat. The phrase, Homeless boy delivers judge's baby, headline screens in waiting rooms, airports, classrooms, and cafes. Social media erupted, not with outrage, but with awe. Millions shared the story. Millions paused their scrolling to feel something real. Jalen's name was spoken in places where it had never been known. Comment sections flooded with praise. Hashtags filled timelines. People who had never stepped inside a courtroom debated ethics, compassion, and what society owed to children like him. Interview requests came from every major outlet. Morning shows, documentarians, talk shows, international press. Offers rolled in by the dozens. Everyone wanted to hear the voice of the boy who had turned a courtroom into a delivery room. Jalen declined most. He gave one short statement to a local paper. "I did what anyone should." Then he went back to school. But the world would not let go. This time, it held on for the right reasons. A local children's hospital offered him a full scholarship to train as a pediatric EMT. "He saved 2 lives before we ever got there," the director said. "Imagine what he could do with the right tools." An anonymous donor bought him a laptop, sturdy boots, a winter coat that fit, and a stack of sketchbooks. Another covered his enrollment at one of the city's top charter schools. The principal himself made the call, saying, "We want him here not because of what he survived, but because of who he is." Letters arrived in thick envelopes, drawings from kids, notes from teachers. One child wrote, "When I am scared, I think about you helping the judge." Another read, "You are braver than anyone on TV." City leaders passed a resolution in his name. Not a holiday, just a promise. That they would expand shelter programs and youth mental health services. They called it the Carter Clause. At a Sunday Mass in Rome, Pope Francis referenced the story in his sermon. He did not say Jalen's name, but everyone knew. "True justice," the Pope said, "begins with mercy. That boy carries God's hands." The letter from the Vatican arrived days later. It was handwritten, folded carefully, delivered with no ceremony, just a knock at the door of his new home. Jalen read it once, folded it again, then placed it in the drawer beside his bed. He never read it aloud. Fame had not touched him. Not in the usual way. He still woke early. He still checked on the baby and smiled when she grabbed his finger. He still walked to school with his head down, but now there were people who nodded back. He studied hard, not to impress, but because he knew what it meant to be unprepared when someone else was depending on you. He volunteered at the children's hospital once a week. At first, he just stocked shelves, cleaned up exam rooms. Then he began shadowing EMTs on drills, practicing with gauze, memorizing protocol, watching, always watching. He spoke little, but when he did, people listened. At the city's annual Youth Leadership Summit, they invited him to speak. He wore the same jacket from the courtroom, newly stitched, cleaned, and still slightly too big. Standing at the microphone, he said only this: "Being brave is not loud. It is just not leaving when someone needs you." That was it. No applause was asked for, but it came anyway. He walked off stage the same way he walked into that courtroom, quietly, with purpose. Jalen never wanted to be a symbol. He wanted to be useful. But symbols choose themselves sometimes. And the world responded not because he was loud, but because he was right. Have you ever seen the quietest soul echo around the world? If this story reminded you that dignity has no volume, share it with someone who needs to hear silence speak. Today, Jalen Carter lives in a home filled with warmth, books, and the sound of laughter. The walls are lined with shelves holding everything from first aid manuals to comic books. A framed drawing of a newborn wrapped in a jacket hangs above his desk, sketched by a child from a local school. The room glows with soft light. It feels safe. Grace, the baby he helped bring into the world, is now a toddler with a voice full of curiosity and feet that never stop moving. She calls him her big brother. When she wakes up crying, he is the one she reaches for. When she wants to play, she pulls at his sleeve with giggles and wide eyes. To her, he is not a boy who was once homeless, not a courtroom legend. He is just Jalen, her brother. Each year on her birthday, they visit the courtroom where it all began. They walk the quiet halls, now renovated, now quieter than before. Jalen carries a flower for the bench. Grace toddles beside him, often holding his hand. The staff at the court know them. They do not stop them. They nod with a kind of respect reserved not for fame, but for history. Jalen places the flower on the judge's desk, not as a statement, just as a memory. Then they leave together, usually sharing ice cream on the steps outside. He now speaks to youth groups across the city. He tells his story without drama, without rehearsal. He talks about shelter, about hunger, about choice. He talks about the day he broke free not to escape, but to help. At EMT training programs, he demonstrates how to check pulses, how to speak calmly in chaos, how to see the person and not just the protocol. Recruits listen closely. His words stay with them. He always ends with the same line. Do not wait to be somebody. Just choose to help. That phrase has found its way onto school walls and community posters. It is scribbled in journals and quoted in speeches. But he never intended it for fame. He says it because he believes it. The scholarship he received is still active, and he is thriving. His grades are steady. His mentors speak highly of his focus and integrity. He balances study with volunteer work, often returning to the children's hospital where he first found belonging. Judge Lorraine Whitmore, now retired from the bench, says she learns something from him every day. She watches him read bedtime stories to Grace, cook dinner with quiet hands, and pack his school bag with meticulous care. She says he carries peace the way others carry posture. Jalen never forgets where he came from, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. He writes letters to the shelters that once gave him warmth. He returns to bus stations with donated supplies. He helps other children find their footing, the way someone once helped him, even if that someone was himself. His story is studied in law classes now, not as a case, but as a turning point. A reminder that justice cannot always be seen in documents or rulings, but in moments of unguarded courage. People still ask how he did it, how he stayed calm, how he knew what to do. He answers simply, "You do not have to be everything. You just have to be there." Today, his story is not just a chapter from the past. It is a page still being written, one of presence, of humility, of love that expects nothing in return. Jalen Carter walks through the world with quiet assurance. He does not raise his voice to be heard. He does not ask for attention. He offers it freely. He once delivered a baby in a place built to deliver justice. He now delivers something greater. If you believe redemption can be delivered in the most unexpected ways, share this story. Someone's future might be waiting.